Hello, I'm Paola Bonfanti, head of Red Lab Curriculum, and we're here today in our videocast talking about biliteracy and how this fantastic phenomena happens at Red House, which starts from toddler and goes up to our high school, and how students can develop language throughout their academic journey. I'm here today with Marcello Marcelino, our co-founder and researcher in language development at Unifesp. Marcello, thank you for coming for our videocast.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's always a pleasure to come to Red House.
Likewise.
Yeah. And we were discussing earlier, before we started today, if it's about language development, if it's about biliteracy. I mean, biliteracy is one aspect of language development. So yes, and we don't talk that much about it. We talk about language development and how children develop language. Yeah. But today we're going to focus on the reading and writing systems and how children develop those.
Yes. Yeah. This is how we start our work at Red House.
Exactly.
Marcello, first of all, what does biliteracy mean and how do we differentiate biliteracy and bilingualism?
Okay, that's an interesting question. Let's start with bilingualism. But bilingualism is actually the capacity to use or operate in two different languages. And biliteracy could be one extension of that, except that not everybody who's a bilingual is biliterate, meaning you would have to read and write in two languages to be biliterate. Mm-hmm. But I think that it's important to understand that there were a lot of myths around bilingualism in the past, that it was harmful for the brain, that it was harmful for the person, that the person would never become actually a native speaker of a language. And now we know that this is just, BS. Okay, let's just use euphemism or just the initials for that. And interestingly, as much as we understand that today about bilingualism, we don't seem to understand that about biliteracy. People still carry this stigma or this idea that biliteracy is harmful for the child, that the child is going to be confused. And this is just as much as it is not true that bilingualism is harmful, it is true that biliteracy is not harmful. It's actually very good for the brain.
Yeah, actually. Yeah, it's very interesting because as we always say at Red House, we work based on evidence. So that's why this leads to my second question, which is talking about Red House. Why is biliteracy so important in a context of an international school just like Red House?
Yeah, it is very important because it's a bilingual school, so children actually have to deal with two different languages from early on. Yeah. So we have kids that are as young as 1.5 starting here, and they're in contact with two different languages, which is great. But there comes a time when they have to start writing and reading and understanding the alphabet. Mm-hmm. And that has to happen in two languages, especially because we have the same alphabet.
Yes.
We don't have a different alphabet. So what's the problem with that? Mm-hmm. Okay, so for Red House, it is extremely important because we treat that as a natural process for the kid. It is a natural process. And it is the very nature of Red House, I think. We're always going up against the mainstream that says, do not bring in a different language before the native language is mastered in reading and writing. And there's absolutely no evidence, no scientific evidence that backs up this idea. And because of that, we don't do it because we have science on our side. And what we do is based on evidence. And evidence shows that the more the child is in contact with different stimulus, the better for the kid, the more developed the kid can become. Yeah. And this is why we do what we do. And we integrate Portuguese and English from early on. Yeah. They know the alphabet in both languages. They learn everything in the two languages. Perfect. And there is no confusion.
Yeah. And I think that there are also studies that say that for children up to 3 years old, they have this capacity phonologically and neurologically, this capacity to develop more than 2 or 3 languages,
Yeah,
right?
in terms of synapses,
Yeah.
children are way more endowed with synapses than adults. So they're able to do more than adults can do. That's number one. Number two, the more stimulus, the more synapses they use.
Exactly.
So why limit it to only one language when they can be exposed to 2 different languages? It makes absolutely no sense. So it's interesting to think that the pedagogy sometimes looks at these elements and comes up with these ideas that have no scientific evidence to back it up, as I mentioned earlier. So yes, we're very much sure that we're doing the right thing.
You're doing the right thing,
yes,
right.
we are doing the right thing.
And how does Red House integrate reading and writing in English and in Portuguese throughout the academic journey?
Okay. Think of a DNA. Okay. The DNA has 2 elements that are intertwined like this. Let's suppose that one is green, representing Portuguese, and the other one is red, representing Red House, representing English. And they're integrated, and they're not divided. They're not separate, and they cannot be separate. They're together. So how do we integrate it? Integrating it, because there is no way to separate them. It's learning to read and write, and learning to read and write in 2 different languages. So the languages are integrated from early on because they're exposed to these 2 languages. Now, it's only natural that when they start reading and writing and recognizing the letters of the alphabet and everything, that they do that in the 2 different languages that they've been exposed to throughout their lives.
Yeah.
So my question is right back at you is not how we integrate it, but I mean, why disintegrate it? Why not integrate it? It has to be integrated, and it's natural. It's a natural process. I think that later on, we're going to talk a little bit more about the idea of confusion, because I have a few things to say about that, because people usually think that it's confusing for the kid. It's not at all confusing, and what people perceive as being confusing is actually something else. We'll talk about that later, I'm sure.
Yes, for sure. And what are the strategies that we use to develop these skills in reading and writing in 2 languages? And as we start from the very beginning, we start since toddler, right? So can you list some specific strategies that we implement at Red House?
Yeah. We work with phonetics, with the sounds, because, there's a basic difference between Portuguese and English. Portuguese seems to be more obvious. You look at a B, you know it is a B. You look at an A, and you know that it's an A, even though A can have different values, because we have we have A, we have right? We have different, because you're not a native speaker. I mean, you're nearly a native speaker of Brazilian Portuguese, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So we tend to think, because we've been through the literacy process, we believe that in Portuguese, we write things exactly as we say them. And this is a lie, because we have a lot more sounds than we have letters to represent them. That's number one.
So it's more transparent, the language.
It's more transparent. I was trying to avoid that word, but it's more transparent, meaning that you look at it and you can see what it is. And in English, it's less transparent. But I mean, it's also not completely transparent in Portuguese. Okay. So what the child has to understand from early on, and they do that, let's say unconsciously, because nobody stops and looks at the child and says, you have to understand that these 2 languages are different.
Exactly.
No, they're just exposed to them, and they're made aware of that in a specific way. So they learn, for instance, that the letter is A, and that A can be pronounced A, and they look at a lot of different words that are pronounced A. If they don't see the word in writing, they recognize the sound, like A. What can you say with A? Well, you can say cat, you can say mat, you can say that, you can say fat, and they go on, using the sound and identifying the sound. Then later on, they learn to identify that sound in writing, okay? And it's more, let's say it's richer in English than it is in Portuguese, because later on, they're going to have to understand that the letter A can also be A, and they're going to go with the words that are pronounced with the A as an A. A as an A. So they go like bait, late, say, etc. Okay, but that's what it is. I mean, they're integrated like that, and they can tell from early on that there are differences between the two languages. This is used to their advantage. It's not suggested as something negative or something, because that's the problem with adults. Adults are going to look at the children and say, this is going to be hard for them. They're going to suffer through that. They're not. Adults suffer through that. Kids just look at that and say, oh, okay. So that's how we do it.
And children also can develop their own strategies in how to complement and how to integrate the two languages, right?
Yeah.
It comes natural for them to pick something that they know it works in Portuguese, and eventually it can work in English. So they can do this mingle of the two languages.
And not only that, they may experiment with one language and use, let's say, correspondences that they developed in language 1 and language 2 and figure out that it doesn't work. And this is not confusion. This is figuring out two different systems. As simple as that. People freak out and just say, it's confusing. It's bad for the kid.
Wrong.
It's wrong. It's confusing. No, what's confusing is that adults don't give children the credit that they deserve.
And it's beautiful to see how, when we see their attempts to write in English and in Portuguese, transferring their knowledge. It's beautiful.
It is very funny. It is beautiful. And that's one of the points. People are used to saying that in, let's say, Portuguese. Okay, because maybe the child who goes here to Red House will have a cousin who goes to monolingual school and they're going through a different process. And then the parents may look at that and say, oh my God, my kid is confused. My kid is going through a hard time. No, they're not. There is a difference between monolinguals and bilinguals. They have different separate processes. And we just have to understand that the processes are different. So if the child is using one language to experiment with the other, that's part of the system that they're developing. They have two languages. They have to experiment with the two languages. That's not confusion. That's sorting out. It's figuring out. It's putting things in the right place. It takes a while.
It takes a while, exactly. Do you think that it will take longer for a child who is in a bilingual school rather than a child who is in a monolingual school to acquire the reading and writing literacy?
There is speculation towards that. We don't really have, as far as I know and as far as I've read, we don't really have enough evidence to say that, yes, it is going to take longer for them because they're in contact with two languages. So we don't have evidence to back that up. But it's only natural that it happens to be that way on some level, because instead of figuring out, let's say, 40 symbols, they're figuring out 80 symbols. So it takes a little longer simply because, they're doing more work. And it takes longer to do more work than it does, to do less work. It's just pure math. So no, it's not confusing. And it's very stimulating for the brain. So I'd like to quote Deon, the French researcher in the neuroscience of learning. So what Deon says, the brain's favorite game is to figure out the system. So if the brain is looking at one language and one system that belongs to that language, the brain is going to figure out the system behind that language. But if the brain is looking at two different languages, the brain has a different task. It has to figure out the two systems involved in the two languages, how they interact, where they are helping each other, where they are different, and where they have to be separated. Because in writing, we have, ways to represent things that are different in the two languages. So the brain is simply doing what the brain loves to do, which is to figure out the rules, the standards, and replicate them. Because that's what the brain does when the brain learns. It learns how it works and how to apply it. And then the brain applies it and says, does this work? Yes. So, okay. Does this work? It's not working. How can I adjust it? Learning is like that. And that's why you have mistakes. That's why you have confusion. And I don't know why people are so afraid of confusion. Confusion is good.
Yeah, it's part of growing.
It is.
And the long-term benefits will come. We are sure of that. In Brazil, there are many schools who still use exclusively the block letters during the literacy process, the famous letra bastão. What's your opinion in this practice, especially considering that our students in international school, they learn with international materials and they need to recognize and produce other types of letters, other types of writing since the very beginning. Okay. So what's your opinion in respect?
I'm going to break that into separate topics. Is that okay?
Yeah.
The first one is, why block letters when we have a large variety of types and different and diversity in representing letters?
Yeah.
We have a number of different A's, a number of different B's, a number of different letters. Okay. They have different functions, but sometimes they're just used to be beautiful in a specific context or on a page. So children have to understand that there's a degree of variation in A, that there is a degree in variation in B, in C, in D. And that has to be understood from early on. Why? Because your brain is trying to figure out the system.
Yes.
And then your brain looks at that and says, okay, this is A, the block letter A. And your brain takes that as the only A. And then during the literacy process, a lot of schools fake an environment where everything is in block letters, which does not represent the real world. So isn't school about representing the world as it is? Don't these schools argue against the use of the drawing of a rabbit instead of using a rabbit itself?
Exactly.
Because it's not the real representation. So why not do that exactly with the letters? Because this does not represent the letter that we're talking about. It's just one facet. It's just one aspect of it. It can have a lot of different ways to be represented. So let's look at all of these ways. So number one, they do not represent the diversity of different types and letters that we can encounter in the real world. That's number one. Number two, it's counterproductive for the brain because the brain will understand that A is this. Then it'll work out a system where everything is capitalized. Everything is in block letters. And it'll learn to read and write in block letters. And that's what schools normally do. Then when the brain is starting to let that sink in and make sense,
all of
the school comes up with a different type of A, a different type of letter. And then your brain gets confused because like, well, didn't I think that it was like that? Yeah, but now there's also this one. So it's almost like you're reopening the system of analysis because you were analyzing it and you figured out that, block letters are the way to write and read.
Yeah.
Fine. But now you see that there's a different way to do it. Okay. Then you start learning it again. But in the process of learning, do it again, you are already reading other things. So you're reading something in science, a little something in math. You're reading a little note that a friend wrote to you, or a little something that is up on the board that the teacher put up for you. So what does that mean? It means that at this point, children should be starting to use reading in order to understand, in order to interpret. But they cannot do that. They have to go back to figuring out letters and sounds. Yeah, because now they have a different way to represent them.
Exactly. So they have to put more effort, first of all, in recognizing the kind of letter and then interpret what they're reading.
Exactly. And it's counterproductive because they're doing the same thing again. Okay. Then they do it again. Fine. Now they figured it out, right? Because they learned print.
Yes.
Is it done? Is it done, Paula? No, because now they're going to have to face cursive writing.
Yes.
Then they start it all over again. So it's very counterproductive and it affects the way children interpret and read messages. Because instead of focusing on interpreting or understanding, they go back to focusing on the representation of A in different ways when they should have learned that all together from early on. Yes, you heard it right. All together.
Yeah.
There is no reason to break them apart. We don't do that at Red House. And you know that I've been fighting that forever.
Yeah.
So we don't do that here. That's not the way it works.
Because naturally, our brain has this capacity to recognize different symbols, let's say. Many times I bring the comparison with Chinese, for example. The language has ideograms, and children have to learn. 4,000. And they have this capacity. They know how to
It's almost
achieve.
never ending.
Exactly.
Right?
So why can't we do the same with our alphabet?
A limited number of symbols that will represent the
Exactly.
sounds.
Exactly.
I really and honestly do not understand where that idea comes from. I've been trying to find exactly where that originated. I know I have an idea.
Yeah.
When I say I don't know, it's almost like somebody who was working with that in the documents, the leading documents, understood that to be the correct way to do it. And that just became the popular way to go about it. But it's bad for our kids. Our kids are not being properly taught to read and write.
Yeah.
Okay. So at Red House, we're correcting that.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen here. It's a shame because it shouldn't happen anywhere in Brazil, but it's
Yeah.
happening.
And as far as I know, it's very common in Brazil, because in other countries it doesn't happen. And I'm very happy and I'm honored because once again we are doing our practices based on evidence. So we studied a lot about that, we researched a lot, and we came up with our way to do our literacy process as a whole.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Paula, let me, was I clear about
Yeah.
the parts that I broke the answer into?
Yes.
Okay, but there's something else that I like to say, something that you mentioned at the beginning. Yes, international materials.
Yes.
Here it is. So at Red House, we had another problem. We use international materials. So international materials couldn't care less about block letters. They don't use block letters.
Yeah.
They use all of the letters, as I mentioned earlier. But the Brazilian system uses block letters.
Yeah.
So you see, there's a conflict. There's a conflict between these two elements because the materials in Portuguese are teaching children to read and write in block letters. But when they're in contact with English, they see capital letters and lowercase and they're all together. And there's cursive also happening at the same time. So we didn't really have an option at Red House. We had to integrate these two systems because children are exposed to both of them. So
Yeah.
and it's a
clear.
good thing because teaching children to read and write in block letters doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's wrong.
It's very clear.
As plain as that. It's wrong.
It's wrong.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay.
Thank you for the question. That was a lovely question.
Nice. What does research in neuroscience and language acquisition say about developing biliteracy?
Okay. Pretty much the same thing that it says about learning to speak two languages.
Yeah.
Okay. Learning to speak two languages is better for the brain because it develops certain areas of the brain faster. There's evidence showing that there's an earlier development of the inhibitory control.
Inhibitory control.
Children have to inhibit one language in order to use the other. Your brain is working out like exercising more than a monolingual brain because you have to balance out the use of the two languages. There seems to be an earlier development of the inhibitory control in bilingual children in relation to monolinguals. Yeah. If I am at home and I'm speaking to my father and my mother and I have to speak to them in Portuguese, then the English language that I use at school has to be suppressed. This makes your brain work out a lot more, exercise a lot more. And this is really good for your cognitive system because your cognitive system becomes more aware, it becomes more vivid, it becomes more used, and you have to use your cognitive system. So that's for manipulating two languages. When you're reading to read and write, you also have to control the two systems.
Yeah.
For example, you're going to have to learn that you use quotes and that in English, the comma comes inside the quotes and that in Portuguese goes outside. So controlling that has to do with your suppression system. And this is extremely good for the brain because most of the good impact that has on the brain has been found out to be outside of the language realm. So for instance, controlling these 2 languages and controlling what you do in 2 languages has an impact on your ability to regulate conflict, to deal with difficulties. And isn't that amazing? Because
it's amazing.
I mean, it's a great...
It goes beyond.
It goes way beyond language only. Okay?
Yeah.
So
it's...
it can only do good for the brain. It can only do good for the cognitive system.
For sure.
So the difference is that, learning to speak 2 languages comes as a natural process. Fine.
Yeah.
As long as you're exposed to the 2 languages, they'll come to you. But reading and writing, no, it depends on,
interaction
and interference.
Yes.
So, and that has to be well planned.
Yeah.
Like teaching all the different types of letters, not only block letters.
Block letters,
okay? That has to be planned.
Yeah, the scope is much bigger.
It is way bigger. Yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Okay. Yeah. So because neuroscience is the basis of our work, so everything that we do is confirmed by studies. So seeing now and how much science advanced, especially neuroscience, how we can apply these strategies at school and how we can develop so much the language.
Because what are we dealing with?
Yeah.
We're dealing with learning. And we need to understand how the brain learns if we want to say something about teaching.
Exactly.
And I think that a lot of times these 2 things are disconnected. People are talking about teaching and the method and the best way and this and that, but they do not look at learning. We're looking at the brain. We want to see how the brain develops that, what is good for the brain, what works for the brain. There are studies about that. Let's apply that. That's what we do at Red House.
And we already have our results.
We do.
Yes, we do. What are the major challenges that usually families encounter, and sometimes even teachers who don't have so much experience, when they have to deal with biliteracy and how they can understand how biliteracy work?
That's a complex question, Paula, but basically, I think that their greatest challenge or the greatest hurdle they have to jump over.
It's a hurdle.
It's a hurdle. I think that the greatest hurdle they have is that they need to break free from common sense. Because it is common sense that tells you that you have to teach in block letters. It is common sense that says that you cannot expose the child to a foreign language before they've learned to read and write in their native language. That's common sense. There is no scientific evidence to back that up. There's no scientific evidence to do that. I think that the hardest thing that teachers and parents alike face when dealing with literacy and mainly biliteracy is to break free from these myths that are holding children back, holding everybody back. Okay? And apart from that, I think that one thing that parents can do at home is read a lot to their kids. Okay, show that they're they have a book and that there are letters and they're reading, they're looking at that and they're telling a story, but because that is written on the page.
Modeling, just the same as we do in the classroom. So we do a lot in the classroom. So we model a lot for our students. So parents can do the same. And what about parents who don't speak English?
They should have started already. I'm not condescending with parents who send their children to bilingual school and do not speak English. They have to learn the language because they need to participate in their children's school life. How can you interpret and how can you sing along a song that your kid brings home from school? You don't want to miss out on that. You want to participate in that. So my question is, and instead of answering your question, I'm going to throw another question back at parents. Like, why are you sending your children to a bilingual school if you're not open to learning the language yourself? Learn the language at least for understanding, at least for reception. You don't have to be fluent. You don't have to be the best model for your kid. No, your kid is going to school for that.
Yeah.
But you need to be able to participate in your child's life, school life. So
and children will help a lot because they will definitely go home and start singing or repeating some situations that they had at school. So they will help a lot.
And I think the parents will find that quite motivating.
Yeah,
that at one point,
sure.
children are going to look at them and say, "That's not the way to say it. You pronounce it like this. Why did you say it like this?
Yeah.
Why don't you say it like that?"
Exactly.
It's one more opportunity for you to be close to your kid and for you to be interacting with them.
Yeah, because soon I remember
in a healthy way.
Yeah, exactly. And also in a natural way because parents are together with their children during their process of learning at school. And also when they become more proficient, they become more knowledgeable of the language. It's amazing to see how many situations these children can face, and it can help parents who don't have this fluency and they don't have this proficiency in English. So we have tons of examples of parents traveling, especially traveling with their children, and children having to sort out situations that parents didn't know how to solve it because of the language.
I mentioned that their ability to deal with that comes from speaking to different languages.
Exactly.
And that's a good advantage that you have that lies way beyond language itself.
You already mentioned, gave some examples in our question now, but if you could give an advice to families who really want to raise their children bilingual and biliterate, what would it be?
Well, treat the two languages naturally as possible. Parents, if you don't speak English, if you do not understand English, go learn it yesterday. Okay. There's no excuse for that. There's no excuse.
Yeah.
Period. Moving on. You read to your children in both languages and you tag along with them, because your children will lead the way in telling you how they want to treat the two languages. Some kids, they prefer to separate the two languages. Others integrate the two languages. Tag along. Go along with your kid for the ride.
Yeah.
Because they'll show you the way. I think that's a very interesting way to go about it.
Yeah.
Treat the two languages naturally. If they use one language or the other, you just treat it as natural.
Yes.
That's my major advice to parents.
Yeah. And in case you have doubt, always talk to the schools.
The school should be there to give you orientation.
Yes.
And Red House is specifically prepared to deal with these issues.
Yeah.
So yes, go to your child's teacher, go to the coordinator, talk to them.
Yeah.
They will know what to tell you.
Yeah. And watch this videocast.
Exactly. And watch the videocast.
So we have been talking pretty much about language acquisition, biliteracy, and so on. But when our students get to middle years, for example, how does this transition from primary to middle years happen, considering the literature genres? Because students have to learn more complex structures, more complex texts. So how can we do this transition in a way that students still continue developing the language, but in a more sophisticated way, let's say?
Okay. I think this is, it's not about being a bilingual school at this point, but it's about teaching children how to, because you know what, early on, they talk about picture description.
Yes.
They talk about picture description, and at one point they're going to describe the picture, or they're going to write about their weekend. So they're talking about the past. So naturally, their writing system should be developing into telling about the past, or telling about a narrative, or talking about, or creating a story, that they can create a story. Then at one point they're going to read a text from their history book. And then they have to write a report, and they're learning how to write a report, because there are ways, there are specific characteristics that a report has to have. We call that genre. Okay, so they begin early on to have contact with different genres. So while they're doing these different genres, they have to learn about punctuation. They have to learn about the use of different letters. They have to learn about more formal or less formal language. You know, if you're writing a note to a friend, if you're texting someone, the language is different. If you're writing a report, it's different. If you're writing a narrative, it's different. If you're writing an essay, which is more complex, then that requires a lot more reading and balancing out, you know, different opinions and different views on a specific topic. They're going to have to learn to balance that out and put that down in order to express their ideas. So this is all intertwined, and it's woven into our curriculum so that kids should be pretty competent in academic writing and in other types of writing, and definitely in reading academic texts and reading history texts and reading all different sorts of genres that they have to produce, because they need to be exposed to the genre to then understand how to produce the genre. So we have a curriculum that makes sure and guarantees that our children and our teenagers are going to have contact with that and develop that, you know, to its best effect.
And it's a natural progression throughout the years, because they start acquiring the language, then they use the language, they start using the language in reading and writing, and they move on up to middle years, that when they are already proficient, let's say. And they have to use the language in a more sophisticated way, in a more academic way. So, but the bases are there. So the reading, the writing, the grammar is there. Now we're moving on to a more, let's say, formal way of using the language.
And they can benefit from using the two languages.
The two languages,
exactly.
Exactly.
I keep thinking, you know, like Portuguese, for instance, sometimes you have one paragraph, one sentence that makes up a whole paragraph in Portuguese. And I find that exhausting when you're reading. And in English, you do not do that kind of thing.
It's more objective.
And I learned to read and write in English and in Portuguese simultaneously. And I think that this has affected the way I write in composition in Portuguese. Like I avoid these huge sentences because I find them confusing, and it's very easy to get lost in the middle of that.
You're right.
Okay. So you see, the two languages are always present and they're always helping you to organize. I think that a bilingual person can actually bring the best of the two languages into their expression. That's what a bilingual is. And remember, a bilingual is a bilingual. A monolingual is a monolingual. They're two different creatures.
Exactly.
Two different critters.
I totally agree with you, because it happens in our lives on daily basis. Continue talking about middle year students. Something that sometimes schools and parents ask a lot is when a student coming from a monolingual school and starts at Red House in year 6, year 7, so middle years up, and they don't have this knowledge of
English background.
English background, or it's very limited. What are the strategies that the school use in order to level up the proficiency and the language?
Okay, that's an interesting question. I think that one of the things that the school has to do is make sure that the child continues, or the adolescent continues to develop, and they're in the language that they have the most command over, of course, because they shouldn't be held back while they're trying to develop the other language. Then they're going to be exposed to a number of different classes in English. So the amount of input that they're going to receive, the amount of demand for reading in that language that they're going to have is huge. So we have to understand that this teenagers' pace of development is going to be different than the pace of development of a child that goes to a regular language school. So because they're going to be bombarded with input. Okay. Then the school has to use a number of scaffolding techniques to help the child to get there. And usually the child has someone accompanying them, let's say, to make sure that they're developing.
It's a kind of support.
It's like support. They have to develop the language while they're developing at school and while they're reading and being exposed to a number of different sources in the new language. So I wouldn't worry too much about that because I think that it sort of happens there's a natural way to develop that. There is a natural way for them to learn that. And I think that at this point, at this age, it makes a big difference if the child is involved.
Yeah.
If they're not resistant. If the child is resistant, then we have a problem.
It's more difficult, yeah.
Then it's not about learning. It's not about language. Okay, so the older you start learning a new language, the more psychological elements are at play.
Yes.
So we have to be aware of that because sometimes you're going to think, oh, but it's about the language or it's about the school not helping. No, sometimes it's about the teenager not wanting that.
Yeah, there are more components.
Yeah, there are a lot of different components. Okay, things that we don't have to consider when we're talking about a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old, we have to consider.
Yeah.
Okay, but basically the school is prepared to deal with that. And I think that the family has to be aware of that as well. And be ready to help.
Yeah, and I think every case must be treated individually. Yeah,
because there is no recipe for success in that area.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay? But we've seen that happening before, and they catch up.
They catch up,
And I think that a lot of the success related to that has to do with the family keeping their anxiety down a little bit.
Yeah.
You know? And making sure that the child is not anxious about that. It shouldn't be about anxiety. It should be about, I'm here, I'm learning, everything's fine. And trusting
the school.
Yeah, and trust the school.
Yeah.
They'll come around. They'll come around.
They still have a long way to go.
Oh, yes. Yes. What's 16 years?
Yeah.
When you're like 30.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the end of our interview. Thank you very much, Marcello.
It was a pleasure to be de frente com Paula.
Yes, yes, it was very nice. We always learn a lot from Marcello's experience and Red House experience. So looking forward to having you here again for another episode. Thank you.
Thank you.